Hello, my name is Kate Sanders with the OSU Alumni Association. Welcome to Travel Talks. The Travel Talks program invites experts from across the university to learn about the places we travel with our group travel program. And this webinar series is not only in a way to share OSU's research and expertise from around the world, but also to introduce you to some of these trips. We offer about 40 group tours a year, and there's land trips, cruises, riverboats, all sorts of travel. And they're, of course, with OSU alumni and friends. So tonight, though, go grab your supplies if you haven't already. Professor Tomasino is going to take us on a virtual wine tasting. She is headed to France in the Basque Country with our alumni travel program this May, and this trip is the inspiration of the travel talk. So even if you don't drink wine, that's okay. Even if you just want to learn about it, this talk is still for you. So earlier this week, we sent out this list of suggested wines. And if you don't have one of these, that is okay too. You can drink whatever you want. You will still get something out of the conversation. So, and if you want to have a few snacks on hand and a glass of water, that's great too. So as you are getting ready, I want to quickly remind you about two more talks this season. We have on April 7th, we'll be learning about Roman feasts and how they have become inspiration for interior design trends. And then on May 12th, we're going to hear from Professor Monique Udell all about cats, our feline companions. So, of course, you can find these talks online as well at fortoregonstate.org/travel talks. Want to tell you about this trip. We have a new thing. Think of this as a cross between a school field trip, a travel talk, and a group tour. We're going to be up in Bend this May, and we're decided to put together this alumni field trip so you can learn about the ecology and the wildlife and the geology of the region. And it's cheap. So, if you would like to join us, we will be there on May 16th. And that evening is our another event called Damn Good Connections. You could stay for that as well and meet all sorts of beavers in the area. There is an event coming up too called Wine Country Conversations, a tasting with OSU. And this is in Napa Valley, California. So if anybody is in the California region tonight, have a look out for this event coming up. It's on our event calendar and there's a QR code below too. So we just started advertising it and I'm noticing looking at the slide that they forgot to put the date. So we will add the date on our follow-up information about this one too, if you happen to be in California coming up. And then just really quickly, because I know you're all anxious to learn about wine, just want to remind you that we don't always go overseas for tours. There are some trips that are close to home. So this September, we have a trip around coastal Maine, seeing the lighthouses in that area. We're also going up to Quebec and Montreal. Then October, we're doing a history, it's called Harbors of History, sailing the story of America's 250th year. So it's an anniversary trip of America along the eastern coastline. And in 2027, we're going to be real close. We decided to do a trip to Puget Sound. And then back in November 27, we're going to be back up in the Canada, New England area because that trip has been proven to be so popular over the years. So now on to our talk. So Professor Elizabeth Tomasino is an internationally recognized leader in wine chemistry and sensory analysis, bringing deep insight to the grape varietals and wine styles that define the Bordeaux region. Her research focuses on flavor and aroma chemistry and sensory perception. And she's the perfect person to guide us on this tasting experience. So tonight we have three things we're aiming for you to learn. One, you're going to explore how your senses work when you actually taste the wine. You'll learn how to compare the differences between Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. And then you'll also understand a bit about terroir and how it impacts wine quality. Elizabeth, welcome.
Hello. Thank you everyone for joining me. And here we go. I can do this, right? There we go. So normally I talk a little bit and then we taste some wine, but I've decided we need to start tasting wine. So if you guys don't already, if you only have one, oh, maybe, yeah, if you only have one wine, pour yourself some wine. If you have two, pick whichever one you want. It's fine. But yeah, I'm gonna walk you through how your senses work while we taste our wines, and then we'll get into the wines of where this trip is gonna be in Bordeaux and the Basque area. So first off, in tasting wine, you have a lot going on with your senses. So there's wine aroma, and I want to say of maybe almost every food, like we do smell things, but I have um people who look at me because I'll sit there and smell weird things at the grocery store, and I'll smell a lot of food before we just go about tasting it. But wine, part of evaluation is really paying attention to the smell specifically. And when you do that, sort of this is a cross section of someone's brain. And I can tell because a student is giving this to me soon. We're going to have one of my students cross sections of our brains up here for everyone to see. But the aroma compounds go up your nose and it hits something called the olfactory bulb. And then your brain interprets things. So you haven't even put it in your mouth yet. Now then we taste the wine, and that goes through our mouth here, and you both get aroma and taste things. So when you see something called retronasal, the aroma compounds actually move through the back of the throat and go up and bind to the olfactory bulb. So when that's the area, like when everyone is sick or has a cold, you have a postnasal drip back there. That's the pathway that those aroma compounds go up and bind with. And then of course we have things that bind with our tongue. And then mouthfeel is actually a touch sensation. And you have similar receptors to what are on like your fingertips, and your toes have a lot of certain receptors. Well, you have a bunch of those in your mouth. So I'm going to start walking us through this. I do want to say if you have some questions, you can write them in the chat. Maybe Kate can keep an eye on that because I frequently don't see questions when that happens.
Got you covered.
Feel free to pop them in there and I can attempt to explain a little bit more. So we're going to start with aroma. So when we do wine smelling, and I actually think I should maybe take my video background off so you can see me doing this. So hang on one sec. None. There we go. I want you to take your wine and we swirl the wine because we're trying to get more aroma compounds. We're increasing the surface area. So more aroma compounds go into the air. Now, if you're not confident you're not going to swirl and spill wine all over the place. See, I was a little splashy right there. You can just put it on the table in front of you and make small circles. And as you get more confident, you keep making small circles and you lift your wine off the table and you're swirling. Then I want you to stick your nose in the glass, take a normal breath and smell your wine. And then I'm going to talk about how this works. I'm smelling my wine as well. Anyways, so you actually have a fairly big nasal cavity in your mouth here. If you look right here, lots of branches and things, if we were to look inside your nose. And right behind the middle of your eyes, right behind where my glasses hit, actually, behind the bone, there's something called the olfactory bulb. So the olfactory bulb has these receptors that go through the bone and through your mucus, and they're waiting for aroma compounds that were in the wine that you just smelled, you just breathed in, to bind. And then that sends essentially a type of electrical signal to the brain where, hold on, I have a better picture of this. Yeah, so right here we have our receptors. Here's our mucus, some receptors, they combine. They go through, here's our bone back there, and they start essentially sending signals through our nervous system where it goes to the brain. And I think smell is really cool because it misses, and I apologize if anyone here is a brain doctor of any type, because I don't normally do this. If I remember correctly, it's the hypothalamus that normally directs where things should go into your brain. But smell is linked to a huge amount of evolutionary behavior, so you actually can have an emotional response to a smell before saying it what it is. So like your brain goes, that's dangerous. You shouldn't eat it. And then it sort of decides to tell you what it is. So it goes two pathways in the brain. But yeah, we have lots of these, and depending on how much mucus you have, because when you have colds, this is thicker. That's why all of a sudden you can't smell as well. But yeah, so it's actually this really cool, intricate system. You have hundreds of these. As you get older, you have to keep practicing smelling wine, guys, because otherwise you start losing some of the olfactory epithelium. So remember, practice makes perfect here. We want to keep lots of those. Yeah, and then your brain, again, those signals go to your brain and your brain goes, I remember what that is. That's an apple or that's a strawberry. If you've never smelled it before, then you can have difficulties describing that. But has everyone smelled their wine, hopefully? I'll pause for a minute. You can smell your wine and let all those compounds bind. Lovely. I think smells really cool. So I'm going to let you taste your wine in a minute. Oh, and we have maybe 2 questions. Cool. I appreciate smell. Ah, you got in front of things, smelled and tasted. We're going to move to tasting yet. So I want to say I'm assuming that most people were taught in school that the front of your mouth tongue is where you taste sweet things and the side is salty and then there's sour and there's bitter in the back. At least that's how I was taught. And we've come to understand that that's not how your tongue works anymore. So taste, there are exactly 5 tastes. Almost everything else is a smell. So a lot of times students, because we have 1 more week of class here and they have to taste for their homework. And someone sometimes writes, well, it tastes like a lemon. And it's like lemon is sour. So it smells like a lemon or it tastes sour. Because you have your sour, our traditional sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and there's a 5th one now, umami, as well. But that's all you have for taste. Whereas there's hundreds and hundreds of smells. This is it. This is what we have for taste. So a lot of times when people say, oh, but it tastes like a strawberry, I have to ask them, do you mean it's sweet? Or is it reminding you of a strawberry? Because if it's reminding you of a strawberry, you're smelling the strawberry through that retronasal aspect. But in this case, our new model sort of says you have taste buds almost all over your tongue, except for not too many on the middle of your tongue, but particularly around. And this whole sort of why you perceive sour and salter and bitter more in certain spots is you just might have a little more of the specific papillae for those taste buds. So you can see right here, there's a little more sweet in the front of the tongue. Sourness, there's a little more on the sides here. Bitterness, there's more in the back. So that's how we were starting to understand why people used to associate this older version. But actually, I wasn't talking about this quite right, guys, because these aren't taste buds. These are papillae. And inside, so we have a couple different types of papillae. So right here, those are what you see if you were to stick out your tongue and look at it in a mirror. And it's inside the channels of this papilla. If we look right here, that's where your taste buds sit. So the compounds that you can taste are the ones that can travel through the papillae and bind with the taste bud. And those are sugars that can do that. Sourness has to do with hydrogen and hydronium ions and things like that. Saltiness has to do with sodium. There's sodium channels that activate your taste buds. Bitterness are a couple different compounds that can do that. So that's where I'm like, taste is very specific, only things that do your taste bud. So now I wanted you to take your wine, for those of you who have not tasted yet, or if you have, make sure you have plenty of wine. This time I want you to taste it, and you want to swirl it around a little bit too. And when you swallow, I want you to try and think of a taste, and you can try and think of a smell too if you want, but specifically a taste to describe your wine. So I'm going to do it with my wine. So I should let everyone know I'm doing a type of red blend. I'm pretty certain it was on the list. I'm getting some sourness to that wine. My wine isn't particularly sweet. Does anyone want to put a thumbs up or hands up if you've got sweetness in your wine at all? Maybe.
I was going to say there's an icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you want to,
Yes.
for being able to like raise your hand and do those things. Or feel free to type in chat too.
Whatever you guys want to do. You might find a little bit of bitterness in your wine. The one that has only ever popped up for me once, and it was in a white wine, was salty. It's actually quite rare for wines to be salty. But normally you'll get a sweetness, a sourness, and bitter are some of our major tastes for the taste bud. But that's not probably what's dominating when you taste the wine, because what's really dominates a lot of times with red wines is mouthfeel. And we probably only understand like 40% of how mouthfeel works. They uncover a little bit every single year. So I'm going to give you what we currently understand. Oh, someone's got a very sour wine and some bitterness too on there, but hey, red wine. So mouthfeel, so first off, as I mentioned before, mouthfeel, you have a lot of tactile nerves. So when say you were to put your hand, if you have a desk or you're at a chair or something and you put it on a surface, actually how you feel that desk, there's like six different types of pressure and vibrational nerve endings that sit in the 3 different layers of your skin. So that's actually how you know there's something right there. And we have some of those in the mouth, but how certain things work, particularly astringency. So that is a drying sensation you have in the mouth. So some of you might have swirled your wine. Feel free to taste it again now. And you know, you just had a liquid in your mouth and you swallowed it, and all of a sudden parts of your mouth or all of your mouth is just dry. It's a drying sensation. That's because there are things called tannins in the wine, and tannins come from grapes and oak, and they bind to the proteins in your saliva. And this is sort of a cartoonish way of seeing what happens. And what happens is these things start to come in and bind, and you start actually breaking up this smooth layer of saliva that's happening in your mouth. So instead of having this lovely mouth coating of saliva, keeping everything moist, our tannins go in and bind up with that. And all of a sudden you don't have that layer in your mouth. Whoops, sorry about that. And winemakers can use like 20 different terms to talk about astringency. I probably use like 3. But other mouthfeel terms people like to use are associated with like fabrics. So think about, particularly after you've swallowed your wine, you know, if it's feeling velvety in your mouth or silky versus maybe like some fine grained sandpaper, thinking about grittiness along those lines. You can also have some things. I've put capsaicin up here because it's a good example, but I've never had it in wine. Capsaicin from hot peppers is a pain sensation from your trigeminal nerve. And the reason I've put this up here is you have other things in wine that can make you perceive pain. So other things that you might be aware of, I've experienced when you get sick and maybe you have a throat lozenger that has eucalyptus or something in it, or menthol, that cooling sensation, that is due to binding with your trigeminal nerve. So that is in itself a type of pain. If you have high alcohol in your wine, you can get heat. Heat is another type of pain that your wine can stimulate. Mine isn't particularly hot, but that's probably because it's only at about 13-14% ethanol. A lot of times when you start getting to 15 and 16% ethanol, people going like, wow, that's really hot. I can feel some heat from it. So that's a mouthfeel you're feeling from that one as well. And the last one you can do, not so much in red wines, but in sparkling wines, the prickling sensation, or like when you drink a carbonated soda and you feel that, that's actually a pain as well. So you can also get prickling from a mouthfeel. So there's a range of mouthfeel happening here. And they're understanding all of these calcium capsaicin channels for how that works. The other thing I want to talk about, because I'm assuming some people might be tasting with a friend or a family member, and you might be describing your wine and the other person is going like, I have no idea what you're talking about. This wine doesn't taste like that at all. Well, there are individual differences that people have. It actually starts with your genetics. So I've put up a few things that genetically mean you experience the world very differently from everyone else. So first off, just the number of receptors you have, the number of olfactory receptors you have, the number of papilla you have, the number of nerve endings in your mouth. I had a woman, I do with some continuing education, we do some wine tasting classes. And she came up to me after a class in person and she said, I really couldn't smell anything. And I was kind of disappointed. I said, really? Oh, and I started to ask some questions. And then she had mentioned the industry she worked in, and I looked at her and I said, did you work with chemicals before they required fume hoods? And she said, yes, she worked with a lot of solvents. So that actually degrades your olfactory bulbs in a manner that they don't necessarily recover over time. So we worked out she wasn't really able to do that because she had lost so many receptors. We had a great question here. Does your ability to smell and taste the nuances degrade as you age? That's where it's like all those brain exercises my father likes to do. He's like, you got to do the crossword. You got to keep your brain sharp. You got to keep your nose sharp. So you have to practice, and practice is smelling it and trying to remember what it's called. And then you can hold on to, they've shown, some great work in Europe that they've shown that people who practice tend to hold on to more of those receptors than people who don't practice. So
Elizabeth, I have a quick
practice.
question for you.
Yep.
For people who do want to practice some of the
Yeah.
smells in
Mm.
different wines, are there kits that you can buy that are labeled like, you'd
Oh,
open it and have a certain smell so you could practice that this is.
so I will say there are some kits. They're fairly pricey. I actually we do in the lab a lot. Number one, I send the students out to the spice department at Market of Choice in places. Or one year we went and got 6 different types of citrus fruit and I made everyone smell them. Citrus oils and flavors and things like that. You don't have to do the specific wine ones because I'm actually not a huge fan of the specific wine ones. But to pick different things in the grocery store in the summer, go out and smell all the different herbs. Or it's starting to be the perfect time of year where pay attention to the flowers as you walk by. So you don't necessarily need special kits for it. But yeah, you can pick different ones up. We found someone, I'm going to say right now, I have something up here called a specific anosmia. You are missing some smell receptors for certain compounds. Everyone is. The issue here is you don't know until someone tests you. So we found out by using some fruit oils that one of my former students cannot smell raspberry, because we were sitting there smelling things and people were like, oh, this one's strawberry and this one's cherry. And then no one got the blueberry, but all of a sudden we're like, oh yeah, this one's definitely raspberry. And he just went, I think mine's maybe empty because I'm not smelling anything. And so we swapped around and I looked at him and smelled him, and it's like, it's definitely raspberry. He's like, I smell nothing. And so we went out the next day and I bought raspberries and I said, taste that. And he's like, it just kind of tastes generically sour. So we're pretty certain he's lacking the receptors for raspberry smell. So he will never experience what a raspberry is. And everyone has one of these. I will let you know 50% of the population can't smell the true compound for vanilla. So it's not the end of the world because they have lots of different types of vanilla extracts, which have different vanillins in them. But if you were trying to go to the orchid that produces vanilla, you wouldn't be able to smell that. There's an aroma compound in violets. So your genetics are linked to the smell of that compound called beta ionone. So if you don't have any, you need 2 receptors. And if you're lacking those 2 genetic receptors, you can't smell that compound at all. If you have one of those receptors, you can only smell it at high concentrations. And if you have both receptors, you can smell it at really low concentrations. So and I purely through a test we did, I have both of those receptors without having to do genetics. Oh, someone asked a few other things. Hyperosmia. And I think that one is linked. God, I'm trying to remember all these. If I remember correct,
Smell and taste. You
thank you.
smell something and then you taste that smell.
Yeah, so a lot of these sort of different, and I'm not going to use the right term. There's some different conditions, and like hyperosmia where you smell it and taste it. Normally this happens when people have had some sort of brain injury. That is a disconnect in the brain. where you're smelling it, and it's actually sending a signal not to where your smell would normally go. It's sending it to where you normally interpret taste. And the same thing happening with synesthesia, if I said that properly. Most of it is linked to the pathway it's going in the brain is not normal. And a lot of times people have this, as I said, if they have a brain injury, I've had friends who have gone through chemotherapy, and because essentially, particularly very aggressive chemotherapy kills a lot of cells. So it changes not only does it change the receptors they have, but it also changes some of the pathways where the signal is going. Yeah. So that is also, does anyone, oh, I won't ask that. You don't have to share. I was going to say, does anyone have that? I'd love to know what when you smell wine, what you taste. A super smeller means you just have a lot of olfactory bulbs. And a lot of people, particularly winemakers, love to tell me that they're super smellers. If you're really a super smeller, you have difficulties going out in the world. Like true super smellers, everything is so overpowering. They tend to eat very bland foods and things like that because everything smells. Same thing with the super taster. Super tasters is you have tons and tons of taste buds. So when you even have just a little bit, it's super, so maybe, where I might require 10 molecules of salt to taste salty, that person needs like 1. And all of a sudden it's really, really salty. So again, I don't think I'd ever want to be a super smeller, super taster, because it would be really hard to go through life like that. But yeah, that's one of the reasons. All of you guys are very, very different. It goes down to your genetics, and it goes down to sort of how you grew up and the foods you ate. But that's why you could be sitting there tasting the same wine and sort of look at someone as they're describing it and go, I have no idea what you're talking about. We're clearly tasting a different wine. Yeah, so those are some of the differences that are happening with that. And yeah, this is just a little test you can do at home if you want to see if you're a super tester. It's the size of a hole punch, a standard hole punch. Put it in a piece of paper. And I think you don't have to, but it's easier if you sort of like take a Q-tip and put a little blue dye on your tongue. And then you put the Q-tip on top, not the Q-tip, excuse me, your piece of paper with the cutout hole in it. And you count the number of papillae. So this person right here with 5 papillae, sort of normal. This person has a lot more. And they would be a much stronger taster than the other person. So you can do that at home if you want to see if you're a super taster or not from a tasting standpoint. There's no way I know of doing that for smell, guys. So but yeah, so that's just some of how we sort of taste wine. We always smell it. Then I separate out taste and mouthfeel when tasting because it can be a lot if you're just starting out. So I always give people, think about one taste the first time you taste it. And then the next time you taste it, think about one mouthfeel. And as you get more experience tasting wine, you'll start to recognize more things or taste more things. You can also taste with other people. They'll help put words onto maybe the things you're smelling that are happening. But yeah, you sort of have to practice and you'll get better at it. But I want to switch over to where we're going to be. Well, some of you I know on this call, going to be in Bordeaux. And Bordeaux is a very famous historic wine region. And it's all the way, this is a map of all of the wine regions in France, but Bordeaux is down here in sort of this purpley red wineish color. And what's really interesting about Bordeaux, so actually a lot of the vineyard locations in France, we are linked back to the Romans, because the Romans, it was part of their daily ration to have so much wine, and you needed so much wine that you couldn't carry it with you, essentially. So as they were going out and traveling and conquering, they would establish these forts and they'd plant grapes, because then they could make the wine that was part of their ration. Because of course, during much of this time, water was not safe to drink. So you needed something fermented, safe to drink. And turns out Roman forts were at excellent locations for growing wine and the wine industry, because they were normally on top of hills. So you have great slopes for good air drainage. They were normally by a river. So not only was there a water source, but you could transport that wine. And of course, the Romans go all the way back to Greeks and even earlier for actually writing down, how grapes were grown and wine was made. So it sort of moved its way into France as the Romans came. And Bordeaux is a great example. Look at this with this river coming in. You have a split, and we have the left bank in this green and purple right here, and we have this right bank over here, and then the entre deux mer in the middle right here. So you actually get some very different soils on each of these areas, but you also, it's great for the climate. The how close it is to the ocean, and the river coming in means it's very sort of, the winter doesn't get too hot. I just said that wrong. Apologies, guys. The winter doesn't get too cold, and the summer doesn't get too hot. And it's just sort of perfect for grapes. But Bordeaux has a couple different things, and on the list, I didn't actually warn anyone, including Kate, because it's a little colder where I am at the moment, and I was also looking at wines you could probably easily get in your local store. I did not put any white Bordeaux wines on the list. It is primarily red Bordeaux wines on there. It is harder to find, it's harder to find white Bordeaux's, primarily because a lot of the Sauvignon Blanc you get in the grocery store is from other countries that have very stylistically different. So the list I gave you guys, I think there was a couple Bordeaux's on there, but it was primarily varietals that we can get as single variety wines, or a Bordeaux blend is a very traditional blend that they make elsewhere. So I was trying for you guys to get some of the varieties that we can have in Bordeaux, because I recognize not everyone might be able to get specific Bordeaux blends from Bordeaux. So for red Bordeaux, you can only have, these are the only grapes you can grow if you're going to call it a Bordeaux wine. So a red Bordeaux can only have Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, Malbec, and Carmenere. It does vary sort of how many of these grape varieties are put in blends. I want to say probably on the whole, at least at the moment, the red Bordeaux wines are dominated by 4 out of the 6, but legally these are the 6 that you can have. White Bordeaux are made of Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, and Muscadel. And you might think that's quite an interesting mix, but actually some of the most famous dessert wines are from Bordeaux, the Sauternes area. And these are very good grapes for making dessert style wines. You will still find some dry style wines, but a lot of times the whites are much more geared towards the dessert style. So this is what you're drinking if it says Bordeaux on the label. And what's really interesting, and why I sort of specified, someone asked, are there limits to the percent in each varietal? Yes, there are. And this comes down to left bank versus right bank here. So the vast majority, I think it's over 50%, has to be from Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot. And then I'd have to go look up, they change it every 10 years or so, what the percentages of the other grapes are. But you will never have a 90% Petit Verdot Bordeaux. It will be dominated by Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. And because of the soil, in particular, what we find between left bank and right bank, so the left bank is in blue and the right bank is in red here, is that for the left bank, it's primarily dominated by Cabernet Sauvignon. And on the right bank, it's primarily dominated by Merlot. And that's just some of these little differences are just better suited just across the river for those grape varieties. And then here you can see these are some of the more dominant varietals. Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot. I think Carmenere is making a little bit of a comeback, but I haven't seen it in that many of the blends. So if you see a wine that says it's a Bordeaux blend and it's not from France, it would be dominated by a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Merlot for what's happening. And that's why I put Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot on there. So if anyone has a Cabernet Sauvignon, please feel free to start tasting your Cabernet Sauvignon. Here's a picture of the grape. Very traditionally, Cabernet Sauvignon is a complex wine. It's a very famous grape variety. You have it, it's one of the more dominant ones planted in Napa as well. But we have fruity aspects of sort of more dark fruits of black cherry, black currant, blueberries. There's can sometimes be a nice floral component within the fruit, but you also have, when people talk about complex noses, you have these other things like tobacco or crushed rocks or an earthiness. Sometimes you can get a little green in the aroma. So it's a lot. There are a lot of different types of smells instead of, oh, it just smells fruity, or oh, it just smells like flowers. So that's what we're talking about with complexity. And particularly in Bordeaux, they're looking for a range of complexity. And so if you haven't, please taste your Cabernet Sauvignon. I've got my blend, so I get to taste for two of the wines because it's got Cab and it's got Merlot in it. I will say one of the reasons, if we go back to this, can I go back? If we go back to this slide, you can see it's normally 70% left bank is Cabernet Sauvignon dominant, but they don't make just 100% Cabernet Sauvignon wine. And I don't know, for those of you that have Cabernet Sauvignon, this is particularly true in California where they do 100% Cabernet. It can be very, very, very astringent. The wine has to age a very long time. Or if you notice your Cabernet Sauvignon, you might be like, oh, it's a little sweet. That's because they're trying to balance out some of the astringency. So Cabernet Sauvignon, of all the grapes, has lots and lots of phenolics and tannins to it. It's in the grape skin. And those things make your wine taste bitter and very astringent. And if you tasted your wine and you have no moisture left in your mouth, you have a very, very astringent wine. That's not necessarily something people want to, you can't necessarily sit there and enjoy a whole glass of that. It actually kills your wine. So that's why they blend other aspects in there. So you get this lovely aromatic complexity, but we blend other varieties back in so it can help round out the mouthfeel of the wine so that it's not just dominating by astringency. Oh, someone is enjoying a nice 100% cab. Yeah, someone's got a bit more tannin to it. So that's why they're sort of blending that wine a little bit. Because then I'm going to go over to a Merlot. So feel free to pop your Merlot if you're having a Merlot. Now you can see Merlot has some similarities to the Cab. So we've got some dark fruits, but different dark fruits here. So black currant or cassis, if you've ever had the liqueur, some black raspberry and plum, more lavender on the nose, a little chocolate. We have spice, but again, we're getting tobacco and wet iron. So a lot of things that if you put that together with the Cabernet Sauvignon that we had before, it would be very complementary aromatically. But Merlot a lot of times is added because Merlot softens the mouthfeel. It's actually known to have a more dominant nose than it is necessarily in the mouth, or it's considered to be much, much more softer in the mouth. So if you have a particularly big wine and you need to make it, shall I dare say, a little more drinkable now, you'd blend a little bit of Merlot in. And that can help blend out the mouthfeel to something that's a little more pleasing to consumers. Otherwise, you might have to sit there and let your wine age for 20 years. And I don't know about you guys, but it's rare I can get like 5 to 10 years out of a bottle. And then I sort of want to know what it's going to taste like. So I don't think I've ever let anything go quite that long to see what would happen. I've certainly opened some and should have left them longer, but never. I've had ones that have been that age tasting places, but personally, I've never laid it down for that long.
So, Elizabeth, really quick,
Yep.
because you say Merlot,
Yes.
do you remember the movie Sideways?
That was Pinot.
Well, they talked bad
I
about
know. They talk about
Merlot.
Merlot, right?
Yes, and that was kind of the running joke in the movie is about
Yeah.
Merlot being, I guess, the beginner wine or the off
So what
wine.
where that came from in that movie is Merlot. A lot of times if you go to the store and it just says red wine and maybe you're drinking your $3 and under entry level, bottom of the shelf boxed wine, and I'm a big fan of boxed wine, guys. It's a great packaging. It's normally Merlot because it's very fruity, it's very soft in the mouth. So if you're looking to introduce people to a red wine, I will throw my mother under the bus. She does not like astringency at all. My mother is game and will taste practically anything. But if it's a red wine, I just wait for her to wrinkle her nose and go, it's too astringent. And I say that because my mother just texted me, so I'm throwing her under the bus. But I know like if I every now and then I find a wine that's fruity on the nose and very soft in the mouthfeel and not astringent, she very much appreciates that. So that's where I think they threw for a very long time they threw Merlot under the bus. Because at least from the United States market, that's people used 100% Merlot at that very sort of entry level. But there's beautiful wine blends that are dominating Merlot. Someone shared with us they have a 70% Merlot. But there is a reason why there's 30% Cabernet Sauvignon in there because you just don't get all the different aspects or what many experts over hundreds of years have decided was important for wine quality. It doesn't really exist in 100% only Merlot wine. You need to have some other variety blended in there to help Merlot out. And it's specifically from that mouthfeel standpoint. So
Is Cab Sauvignon the best or the best one to or the most common one to blend with Merlot?
it's probably the most common, particularly in the United States. It's the dominant one in California as well. But like other countries blend different things together. Like a GSM in Australia is a Grenache Syrah Mourvedre. That's a very famous blend. No Cabernet Sauvignon whatsoever. So and we'll talk about the next wine when we go to Spain. I'll talk a little bit about Merlot is used in one of the blends near the area we're going to, and it's to help again, it's to help with the mouthfeel a little bit. Um Now someone says then you get to to finish the wine. She doesn't like it. Yeah, my father and I have finished several wines, but I give my mother credit. She tastes all of them. She will give them a try. And she likes very expensive champagne, which I discovered a few years ago. I was surprised about that one. But she's game. She will try everything because I have other friends who are very picky and will only try exactly what they like. But yeah, we normally finish the bottle. I can't complain about that. But the next thing I wanted to say, think about these aromas. So dark fruits, some tobacco, some spices. We go back here, crushed rock, violets. Think about the food that is very famous in Bordeaux. So put some pictures. And for those of you that have heard me talk before, when I get hungry and it's kind of getting onto dinner time, I traditionally start making wine and food pairings. So I put a slide together because very traditional dishes in this area, roasted meats, steak frites is very found a lot. I put a roasted chicken up there, mushroom risotto. These have aromatics and flavors in them that are very complementary to Bordeaux style wines. That earthiness from the mushrooms, some of the roasted notes from the meats, it goes very well with the wine and sort of those aromatics of the wine. And then I've just put up here because I'm excited to try these because I've never had good ones. They go with the dessert style wines, these little pastries called canelles that maybe are close to a choux pastry. I'm not entirely sure, but they're coated in sugar and it's supposed to go perfectly to that. Oh, and someone has Googled for me. Thank you so much. Googled or she knows. I appreciate you sharing about Merlot. Yeah, but yeah, so that's sort of our French, and there's certainly other wines, and each winery, if they make a red wine in Bordeaux, it will be of the varieties I put up there, but each winery will have its slightly different nuances because their specific vineyards might be a little different. The winemaker might decide they want to showcase specific aspects, but you can still expect it to have the very traditional characteristics of a Cabernet or a Merlot, depending on what side of the river that you are on. Yeah. So now I'm going to move to Spain. So we're going to go a little south. So Bordeaux sort of, if I extended this map a little higher here, Bordeaux would be up here. And where San Sebastian is, I believe, is sort of over here on this northernish area because the airport's really, the Bilbao airport's very close to where this is going to be. But the wine area that we're really tasting from is the Rioja. And this is very famous. Probably one of the most famous ones in Spain. And it's actually this specifically, I sort of mistook it for a minute. It's this dark orange right here along this river. And again, you just heard right there, river. Bordeaux was on the river. We look at a couple other things. I think I'm going to mention the Ribera del Duero briefly along a river. Very important for growing crops because, of course, Spain's a little more south. I know, right? Ooh, someone's got a good Tempranillo. Yes, if you got a Tempranillo, open your Tempranillos now. We're gonna swap over and talk about Tempranillo wine. Um, it's a little more south, so it's a little warmer. If you look at some of the I knew Scott Burns is a geologist who's from up around Portland, and he's done many talks, and he likes to show me all the dirt and soil maps. Some very different soil, but certain things are also sort of similar, but a little different. So I just looked up some climate data between Bordeaux and the Rioja region, and if you see right here in Bordeaux, from a Fahrenheit 40, 41 in the summer, got as high as, why don't we call that maybe like 64, and then drop back down. So it's pretty cool there. And if we look at rain, here we go. We have millimeters. That's going to be easier to read. Probably about 100 millimeters in January, and then it slowly goes down, but you still get some rain right here. You're at about 60, and then it goes way back up again in the winter. And we see some similarities, but a little different. So if we look over here, sort of similar winter temperature. It gets a little hotter. So this was at probably 68, 70, close to, drops back down. And then from a rain standpoint, this is a lot less rain, guys. So you have to look at the scale here. You might say, oh, but it looks really similar, Elizabeth. And it's like, yeah, I kind of created them in a manner that you might get a little tricked. But if we look at this scale on the right side, Bordeaux goes from 0 to 150. Rioja goes 0 to 75. So you have much different rain happening in here. And particularly in those summer months right here of July and August, barely getting 30 millimeters, where in July and August in Bordeaux, they're getting double that. So it's much drier. And this is, of course, something, and I was actually surprised when I saw this temperature. This is from a couple years ago, because there's always a bit of a lag on some of the climate data, but they've gotten higher and higher temperatures over the years, in particular. So very different climate. The soil is very different. This is not my picture, but I have been here. A lot of times the vineyards are surrounding these gorgeous towns. They have beautiful soil. Yeah, we get a lot of rain. Someone said to compare, we get 6 to 9 inches of rain a month in the winter. What's interesting about the Willamette Valley is you also don't really get rain in the summer at all. So if you look at totals through the year, we get a lot of rain, but not in June, July, and August, and probably going into September now. It's a very interesting thing to compare. Sorry, I just had a note I wanted to say right here. So both of these areas make very age-worthy red wines, very historic. This is where that terroir, where I was saying sort of think about terroir. And one of the, yes, these are average temperatures. One of the reasons I can't give you a direct comparison is they don't grow Cabernet Sauvignon in the Rioja. It doesn't grow well there. They do grow some Merlot, but this is where they've worked over many years that Tempranillo grows best. So that's where they're not growing Cabernet Sauvignon. The soil and the climate is better suited for Tempranillo than it is for Cabernet Sauvignon. And it still gets some maritime climate in the Rioja, again, because you're down that river. There is a reason it's there. But the water in particular, it's tricky for what's happening. And typically you get bigger, sort of in climates that don't get as much water, you tend to grow grapes. They like to talk about them being more concentrated. Bigger, can handle more aging, can handle some different types of winemaking, like the type of oak barrel that's used. So you start to get even more differences between the wines because of what they can do winemaking. So these are, this is a very actually more modern vineyard right here, very traditional. You can machine harvest it. There are some places in Spain where they grow them in sort of these, it's almost like a pit, because it's so little water and so much sun that they try and get all the moisture at night to go down and sort of collect. And the vines don't get this big, nor do they look as lovely, just because you have limits with your water. So if we go, here's Tempranillo. I'm sure you're saying looks really similar to a Cabernet. Well, FYI, guys, a lot of the red grapes do look very similar. This one's probably a little more on a light purple range than Cabernet Sauvignon. Ooh, sorry. If we look at some of the primary flavors, there are some similarities here. If we look at this top right here, cherry, plum, tobacco, leather, vanilla. But I will say what's very traditional of Tempranieros, instead of all that dark fruit that you get in Bordeaux blend, Tempranillo, particularly 100% Tempranillo, does tend to skew a little bit more on the red fruit side of that platform. Not as much on sort of, there was a lot of crushed rock and floral, and we're not really seeing a lot of floral out of this grape. But you start to get vanilla and some leather, and that comes from winemaking choices. It tends to have quite a bit more acidity. So 100% Tempranillo wines, it actually took me a while to determine if I liked Tempranillo because they were really sour. And it turns out this grape, in the heat that it grows in, and the lack of rain, actually holds on to its acidity really, really well. So if you don't like very astringent wine, but you do like things sour, and I do actually like things sour, this might be the wine for you. I've put up on here, it's also grown in the Ribera del Duero. And what's really interesting is in the Rioja, and they might be changing this, at least from, I was there 2 years ago, and they were talking about changing it. If it was listed as a Rioja red wine, it had to be, and Tempranillo, it had to be 100% Tempranillo. And in the Ribera del Duero, you can do up to 10% Merlot. And I actually really enjoyed the Ribera del Duero because I liked how the 10% Merlot sort of smoothed out and evened out some of the acidity that was happening in the Tempranillo. I actually think you could probably age that Tempranillo a really, really long time with that acidity going on. But does someone likes nice peppery mouthfeel? Yeah, that's all good. Anyone else manage to find a Tempranillo that you have? Want to share what you're experiencing?
What would be a good Tempranillo blend if you wanted to mellow out that sourness a little bit?
I mean, I think it's that one from the Ribera del Duero where they do 90% Tempranillo and 10% Merlot.
Mm.
It really does a nice job without like if you added a Cabernet Sauvignon, you might be softening the acidity, but then you're adding all this astringency to it. So the Merlot just, yeah, it evens. Merlot's a great blender. It can really help round out a wine. Oh, someone's got the Albacella. Yeah, if you're in Oregon, Albacella makes a great Tempranillo. Um, so yeah, no, that's a lovely wine as well. Yeah, but I think Tempranillo is really fun. I hadn't had a lot of it, and then I went to a conference in the Rioja and got to experience quite a bit of Tempranillo. And there's a reason why it goes oh so well with Spanish food. So that acidity cuts through very fatty. Think about chorizo and some of the cheeses that are very traditional. It pairs so well with eating plates of charcuterie and jamon and other things like that. The acidity really cuts through. I've attempted to put a picture of a spice rubbed steak up here because again, grilled meats are very much a thing, and acidity can cut through the fatty aspect of some of that meat. Here's our spicy potato bravas, a very famous tapas. The spiciness, there aren't a lot of wines that pair very well with very, very spicy food. And Tempranillo, I think, can do that because it's not too complex on the nose. It still has some complexity in the flavor. But then the mouthfeel really, really cuts through the starchiness of those potatoes. And then I just put this up here because like practically anything goes with churros. Pick your wine, guys. But I put it up here for chocolate. So there's not a lot of dry red wines that can go well with chocolates. A lot of times it's sweeter styles that are paired with chocolate. But I do think the fruity nose on Tempranillo and the acidity can really pair well with chocolate. Because I wouldn't necessarily pair a Bordeaux red with chocolate because the astringency, like if it's really bitter and you're having a darker chocolate, like I like very dark chocolate, it just makes the chocolate taste more bitter. Whereas if you have something that's more acid, it can balance out the bitterness of that chocolate. So we have some lovely, as I said, there's a reason why the food and the wine developed along the same lines. They pair very well with each other. And then I hope you enjoyed this and you got a lot of information and you might want to try and go explore some more of these wines if you can. I will let everyone know if you're looking for a large variety of wine, we do it for class. I do wine.com just because they have a lot of different wine and you have shipping things, but there's a lot of online places where you can find a lot of these different wines. If you're looking for the very famous, very expensive Bordeaux wines, a lot of times these are sold as futures. So if you're looking for a Chateau Petrus, which goes for several hundreds of euros, you might be able to buy one that's released like 10 years from now. So recognize some of the very, very famous ones you might not be able to get, but you can certainly search. What is it? Winesearcher.com is a great website that sort of lists where you can find these online for you, depending on the country you're in. But yeah, thank you for joining me.
Yes, and if anybody has questions, definitely add your questions into chat if you have some more questions for Professor Tomasino, because this has been a wonderful conversation. When we were talking about the different tastes, I do have a friend who can actually taste words. So she has
Oh, I
one of
have so
those.
many questions and I
I
want to like
know.
just give her things to taste. That is
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah. So certain words, she'll say a word and then she'll get a taste in her mouth. And so
And
I
I've
would,
known
yeah.
I've known someone who said like music, when they listen to music, they see specific color.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
I know. And then my husband is one of those super smellers. He can smell anything.
Oh, is he signed up to be on my sensory panels?
No, but I should have him do it.
He needs to.
Well, if anyone has any questions, please add them in the chat. And I will say, we have Dean Simonish is on with us. Let me see if do you wanna say something?
I've been here and I'm drinking a Bordeaux from Trader Joe's. And just
Probably really
wondering,
good. They get like, I know it says Trader Joe, but they get good wine.
yeah, it's not Trader Joe brand, but
Okay.
I forget the brand. I'm in my office, but the bottle's not here, but the glass is. Um, anyway, I've been enjoying it. I haven't always been a big Bordeaux fan, so I'm interested. I'm excited to learn more. Just a couple things. Our upcoming trip. I don't know who all online is going to go to Europe with us. I don't know if there's any more spots available or not. If we've maxed out. How
We've
about on that
maxed
other
out, yeah.
spot? We've maxed out. Oh well, we just have to do it again. But what you can join us for, and I think Kathy Ward is online. She'll be hosting us and has arranged this and April 19th in Napa Valley. I know Oregon has amazing wines but was an opportunity for us to get closer to
Hey, there's a
uh,
lot of OSU students who work in
yes,
Napa now.
that's true.
Yes.
That's true. So we want to share the love and for folks who might be in California, give them an opportunity on April 19th, 2 p.m. I think it's a Sunday to join us in Napa. So yeah, that would be awesome. So excited to both April 19th and then wow, do we
Is
leave
it
like
May
just a
1st or
few?
something like that?
Yeah,
May
we
1st
leave pretty
is coming so
quickly
close.
after
Yeah.
that. I'm
You
looking
do.
forward to all of it.
Yeah.
And Kathy says, looking forward to seeing everyone, seeing us. So
You do have a few folks that are on the talk tonight that are going to be on the tour.
okay,
So yeah, this is pretty great.
great.
And then we fixed the slide. My colleague put that one together really quickly for me. So I fixed it. And yes, Julie, I fixed the spelling of Napa. Thank you for showing.
Kate, it happens to the best of
I
us.
know.
It creeps in.
So we added the date and we added the time. So a little bit more information.
Anyway,
Um,
looking forward to seeing all of you either in Europe or in Napa. Both good places.
So,
Wonderful. All right. Well, it's 6:30. So we'll just call it a night. I don't see any more questions coming through. Just reminding everyone that we're online, of course, at fortoregonstate.org/travel with all of our trips up there. We're still on Facebook, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. And thank you so much, Professor Tomasino. It was wonderful as
oh,
always.
thanks everyone for joining me.
Yes.